Hello, everybody out there in radio land. It is once again that time of the week where we hop onto your radio dial and we talk to y'all about what is really going on here in the city of Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so-called United States, and around the world from a working class perspective. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. So today's it's got a bittersweet show. It's one of our last shows in the old studio. We're going to be switching over to the new one this fall, possibly a little bit sooner. Especially for my second program, the electropop therapy, we're going to really be, taking a trip down memory lane. But I did want to acknowledge that um, the studio that we have been broadcasting Media Cyphers out of for the last, oh gosh, it's been 7 years. Can you believe it? 7 years I've been on this radio, yammering on about politics. Um, but yeah, we will soon be moving. So I haven't seen it yet. I don't know what it looks like. It's all shiny and new. Um, but yeah, that's exciting. But yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out. The studio has served us very well. We've interviewed lots of wonderful guests here over the years. Um, Lots of great insights. And it'll be sad, bittersweet moving to the new place. But it is good and gravy for us that us folks here at White are going to be having access to a new studio with all the newest little gadgets and gizmos that you need to do a modern radio program. So I'm flying solo today. We were gonna do a a panel style show. Had some family stuff come up, so I will be bringing you today's hard truths solo. But as always, I think we're going to start talking about some pertinent local issues. And the first couple things I actually want to talk about, one is just, I mean, it does relate a little bit to uh, capitalism and whatnot, but this is more so kind of a PSA, if anything else, letting people be aware that the Kalamazoo Metro bus is going to be adjusting their services due to a driver shortage. Pulling this from WWMT, that's our local CBS affiliate. It's written by Samantha May. Beginning on Monday, August 28th, Kalamazoo Metro service will make service adjustments due to the decrease in bus driver staffing. The Metro saw a high turnover at the beginning of the pandemic, according to Executive Director Sean McBride. Unfortunately, we've recently lost more drivers than we are able to hire. Metro is working very hard to attract new drivers to the Metro team. Metro is very committed to providing exceptional public transit service so we can get our riders to work, school, and essential services. Here's the big things that y'all should look out for. And anybody riding the bus, this is really important information. The So the Metro bus, during the day, the busier lines anyway, would have two buses an hour, one at 15 and one at the 45-minute mark. Um, Buses for West Main, Alamo, Stadium Drive, and Portage Road at the 45-minute mark are going to be eliminated. They will continue to run at 15 minutes after every hour from 6:15 a.m. to 10:15 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Also, the Westnedge, Gull Road, and Lovell routes, and that's particularly important for any students out there. That's kind of the main portal to the downtown area from campus. But they're going to run from 2:45 p.m. to 5:45 p.m. Monday through Friday only. And the 45-minute service has been eliminated from 5:45 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. So again, the Lovell in particular is going to only have 45-minute service uh, from 12:45 to 5:45, so that 5 hour window. And the 45-minute level service from 5:45 to 6:45 has also been eliminated. They will continue to run at 15 minutes after every hour from 6:15 to 10:15, Monday through Saturday. So at least 6 days a week, there will be an hourly service from level to downtown, from campus to downtown. And I do want to bring up, so the political and economic context of this. So if y'all remember, if you're a longtime listener, we had a story a couple of years ago about the Metro bus drivers um, uh, uh, picketing and protesting for higher wages and a better contract, better working conditions. How that eventually worked itself out. Um, they did eventually come to an agreement, but um, I think what they have an example of this of here is when workers' demands are not being met, there is not that appeal for them to come and be employed as bus drivers. And this, of course, affects everybody in the community. There are a lot of people, including myself, who rely on the Metro bus line to get around. And for a lot of people, this could end up being a really detrimental inconvenience. And everything from inhibiting people's ability to get to work or making it more difficult. Maybe you end up having to necessarily get to work something like an hour early because that's the only bus time that can get you there when you need to be there. Um, and it also drills down to austerity politics. We are not offering enough to working people in the community to recruit them to drive our buses. And what's very interesting to me is, especially before the pandemic, it felt like we were kind of turning the page, and it seemed that Kalamazoo was finally trying to be more ambitious, or at least have some parity with more robust public transit systems we see in other parts of the state, like in Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, um, Metro Detroit. And it definitely seems we've backslid a lot since the pandemic, and we really lost the um, ambition to have a more robust metro transit system. And especially as Kalamazoo grows, that is something we're going to need. So it's the ball really is in the court of the city, and the city commission and the transportation authority, um, to kind of get the ball dribbling again, get us back on that track towards having that better transit system that I think Kalamazoo definitely needs and deserves, and the working people of Kalamazoo especially need, so that we can go about our day, put in our time, and get home in a timely manner so we can go back to our communities. So again, if you wanted to read that, that's from WWMT. Kalamazoo Metro adjusts services due to bus driver shortage. And if you wanted to find out more about the actual bus route changes, you can go to that's Kmetro, uh, kmetro.com or .org. Yeah, that's okay. Kmetro.com. You can find all of the bus schedules on there. And hey, if you're interested in potentially joining the Metro Transit, they are going to be hosting a job fair on Tuesday. Well, I guess that's today. If you have time between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m., that's going to be at 530 North Rose Street. So yeah, hoping we can get more robust busing going on here in the city, the dear city of Kalamazoo. This next story, this is going to be kind of a quick hit, but it's caught my eye because I've seen, I have heard this story before, and I'm a little concerned. But this is also from News 3. This published yesterday. And the city of Kalamazoo is considering establishing a tax incentive zone downtown. I'm going to read a little bit from the article here. This is a pretty short one anyway. Uh, Kalamazoo City Commissioners are receiving a resolution Monday to create a tax incentive zone downtown to encourage new construction and rehabilitation. The zone called Neighborhood Enterprise Zone, or NEZ, would be between Eleanor, Rose, Water, and Park Streets. The property is located right across the street from the new Kalamazoo Justice Facility, and the property which is slated to eventually become a downtown event center. The NEZ would offer tax incentives for both new construction and developers looking to rehab existing building floors into housing units, according to the city. Plaza Corp has approached the city about creating an NEZ around the property known as Arcadia Ironworks, officials said. The proposed NEZ boundaries include this property located at 203 North Rose Street, according to the city. The developer looks to construct around 82 new units of housing on the property located at the corner of Rose and Water Streets, according to attorney Pat Lennon and Henigman law firm. Now, why do I have cause for concern? Well, it's this sounds very much like gentrification, um, and that is to say, prioritizing the development of infrastructure downtown for the wealthy, the petty bourgeois, if you would, rather than the affordable housing stock that the city much more desperately needs. And particularly the way they've carved out that chunk of downtown for this new event center that, again, uh, as we've spoken about on previous episodes, most of the working class of Kalamazoo does not actually want. Um, they are kind of carving out this chunk of downtown as a potentially kind of a playground for the wealthy, rather than, again, going back to some of the original ideas of how people wanted to use that space. This idea for like an affordable housing complex with a public park, something that would be an asset to the entire community. And just from the way this is parsed out, it seems like the intention is to build out infrastructure to accommodate this new event center, and essentially drawing in more wealthy people to gentrify the core downtown area, which again is really dubious when Kalamazoo is in the midst and has been dealing with a houselessness crisis for years. And we're actually going to be talking about that next. How people standing up for the houseless and how their needs are taken care of versus the needs of rich people who want to live next to a big arena. Um, so, and again, I could be wrong, or as often happens, and I do remind people this, public scrutiny and public pressure can have really good outcomes here in Kalamazoo, which is to say, when there is public scrutiny on things like this tax incentive, usually a little bit of damage control can be done, which is to say, we're able to put pressure on the city to at least make some concessions that will help working people in town. You kind of saw this in action with the work that County Commissioner Tammy Ray did around the event center, trying to get more kind of make it more of a deliberate asset for people in North Side, getting kind of work programs and cash donations to local community foundations. So I think there is an opportunity here to get some public scrutiny of this to see if we can force the city to retool it in a way that might lead to at least a scotch more equity. Um, of course, me being the socialist radio guy, I would say that the better solution would be public ownership of that space. But that is, I guess that's an idea to discuss another time. Um, Think we're gonna take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Just let you know, you can check our show out a couple different ways. We've got a YouTube channel. We put up all of our content, as well as our podcast. You can find it on most podcasting apps. That's Media Cyphers Kalamazoo. With that, going to take a quick little break. We come back. We're going to talk more about what is going on here in Kalamazoo. Keep your eye locked. This is Media Cyphers, your only source for political revolution. Hello, we are back. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So our next story we're going to talk about, this is an update to something that we have talked about on the program several times before. This is about our dear comrade Moni Padula, who you may know that they're an Indigenous activist here in the Kalamazoo community, and they were present. Sorry, turn the sound down a little bit there, folks. They were present when the Ampersee Houseless Encampment back in 2021 was evicted by the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety. Since this happened, they've been facing a court case. Basically, the police is alleging that Mani assaulted an officer. There's been a lot of contention to that. You can find the footage online and kind of determine for yourself. But as they have argued before, essentially, they were trying to aid another protester who was being assaulted by the police. And what just happened yesterday is Mani was sentenced, and it is kind of a mixed bag. It's certainly it could have been far worse for the gravity of the charges they initially tried to stick Mani with. Um, I think this article from MLive actually does a really good job at trying to kind of not only be impartial but presenting Mani's side of the story, because I know when this event first happened, we actually had a lot of criticism for both WWMT and the Kalamazoo Gazette for really kind of being stenographers for what Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety had to say about the incident. So I'm going to read a little bit from this. This is from the Gazette again. Activist sentenced for clash with police at Kalamazoo homeless camp sweep. And this was written by Brad Devereaux. On Monday, August 21st, Moni Washington Padua was given a sentence of 4 days in jail, and the judge granted her credit for the 4 days she had already spent there following the incident, meaning that Washington Padua will not serve any additional jail time. She was ordered to pay court costs and attorney fees, Judge Paul J. Bridenstine said from the bench. On October 8th, 2021, Washington Padula was arrested after a clash with police as officers worked to clear people from a homeless encampment on the east side of Kalamazoo. Washington Padula, an Afro-Native Ojibwe community activist, has said she went to the location to support those being cleared off the site, and she was advocating for a man when the incident happened. The man has since told her that her actions may have saved his life, Washington Padula told the judge before receiving her sentence. The man, a protester named Minto Matthews, was taken to the ground by officers and was heard saying that he couldn't breathe, Washington Padula said previously. And I'm going to quote directly from Moni here, but this is important in the context 2021. This is coming right off of the year of rebellions that was happened in 2020, directly related to police brutality. If you see somebody being choked out by the cops, you're going to have a certain reaction to it. Or at least hopefully, you're going to try to advocate and stop the harm. Um, and in this case, it's that's part of what ended up getting Maui into trouble. So going on, Maui said themselves, I want to stress that to marginalized people, we find that police mass arrests and excessive force of nonviolent demonstrators is received by those who are using their First Amendment right as an act of intimidation and political suppression. She said the police response that day heightened the stress response of citizens who had planned a nonviolent demonstration. Washington Padula said an officer sprayed pepper spray at her and her back and shoulder were injured during the arrest. She also ended up spraying some pepper spray. Washington Padula was carrying a flag on a pole at the time of the incident, and police allege she struck an officer with it. She disputes the claim. The incident led to charges filed against her. In May, she pleaded no contest in Kalamazoo County Circuit Court to using a self-defense pepper or fluorescent capsaicin spray. The charge is a high court misdemeanor. A video shows her being slammed to the ground by an officer during the incident. My face is burning and I need a medic, Washington Padula says on the KDPS body camera video that she obtained from the city and posted online, talking about pain from pepper spray. An officer tells her they've got a medic, but they need to identify her first. After the hearing on Monday, Washington Padula said she had to make the decision about what to do quickly while advocating for the safety of a friend. I did feel I did what I need to do to prevent something worse from happening. Several supporters attended the sentencing hearing, and some said they'd been to multiple court dates for Washington Padula. Outside the courtroom, she thanked them for following the case. So, again, it's a situation where it could have potentially been worse legally for Monty, but at the same time, I think this story really highlighted certain double standards. Especially when it comes to how citizens interact with the police, and the fact that the police are allowed to kind of come into this environment and be the instigators, be the aggressors, um, trying to aggressively sweep this camp, which again, we may end up replaying an interview we did about it. This is a couple years ago with a different activist, or last year, I should say. But really describing the way that it was almost like an invading army coming in, trying to force these people in a matter of minutes to pick up their entire lives and leave the site. Um, and it is also worth noting, so um, there's also actively a petition going about there are other folks still in court, and there's an online petition that is still circulating. It's at almost 2,200 signatures right now. Um, and I'll read from that real quickly. On October 7th and 8th, allies stood in solidarity with Ampersee encampment residents being evicted by the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety. The police, intent on criminalizing houselessness and weaponizing the right to self-defense, responded with brutality, punching, kicking, tackling, and macing residents and allies. As this petition was being written, 10 protesters were facing various criminal charges for exercising their right to demonstrate. Black, Indigenous, Latinx, trans, and houseless protesters whose rights were violated by KDPS are facing particularly trumped up charges. Prosecuting those standing in solidarity with our most vulnerable community members tacitly and deliberately discourages Kalamazoo residents from supporting our other houseless neighbors. The city of Kalamazoo depends on the unpaid labor of community members to meet the survival needs of the unhoused, needs which the city not only consistently neglects, but exacerbates. In return for helping our neighbors, community members are met with city-sanctioned violence and arrests. Historically, before property laws dominated how we view the land, it was common practice for both Indigenous and Black people to migrate wherever their needs were most met. Kalamazoo remains unceded Anishinaabeg ancestral territory. The land belongs to the people and not the police and not the city. So again, those are words from a petition that is going on or it's being signed, and we will link to that in the show comments. And also, there's a really good article from Now Kalamazoo. I think we will also link to from around the time of the incident. They were one of the few outlets that were really digging a little deeper than kind of just the surface level reporting we saw from the police and from outlets like Channel 3 and Live. So, tip of the hat to them in particular. And again, I will say, as somebody who, what's the correct verbiage? I don't know. Let's say a fan of their work. Appreciative, I guess, of the incredible work that Moni has done in the community over the years. I am breathing a sigh of relief that they're not facing any serious jail time. At the same time, it is worth condemning the city and the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety for, responding to the Houseless at Ampersee in the way that they did, and for dragging one of our community's most stalwart activists through several years of pain and stress and legal irritation. Again, we will be linking to that petition on our page, as well as some other information to go along happen. But Moni is a free activist, and I hope they get some rest, get some good time with their family, um, and again, I stand in utmost solidarity with them. We're going to take another quick break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Also, once again, reminding y'all, you can check out our program on YouTube. We got a YouTube channel that's especially helpful if you have difficulty hearing, as I do. We have subtitles that you can kind of read along with. Or we also do have a podcast, the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. Take our best material, put it up for your listening pleasure. So you don't necessarily have to tune in every Tuesday at noon. And in fact, my deepest hope is that you subscribe to the podcast and that you put it on in your place of employment. So you're back there in the kitchen, or you're a custodian, you're cleaning, putting your earbuds, and listen to some political analysis while you're putting in those hours. In any case, we'll be right back. We're going to take a quick little break. This is Media Cyphers, your only source for political revolution. As I said, lovely background music from Quantum Fleek. Although, yeah, I think they're a little prescient with this one. I think this recording is from back in 2015 or so. So yeah, the robots really are taking over. We're talking about AI and all that, but we're not going to be talking about that right now. I think our next story, and this is more just some valuable and important information y'all should know, and particularly with the students coming back just a little bit here. I thought this was an important story to touch on, and I really appreciate the kind of the 401 or one, yeah, 411, the 411 that Bridge, Michigan laid down in this article about how what student loan forgiveness and what that means in Michigan, and what you should know if you are a student or a prospective student about student debt here in the state of Michigan. As many of us I know, the student debt or student loan borrowers are expected to resume making payments to their loans beginning this fall. Thank you, Supreme Court. There is a new income-based repayment program for borrowers that could lower monthly payments. And pertinent to Michigan students, Michigan lawmakers approved $225 million for a program to help school district employees pay back their federal loans. From the article, federal student loans will start accruing interest in September and payments will be due in October. Borrowers are navigating the sometimes confusing world of signing up for a repayment program, avoiding scams, and making sure they have a plan in place to resume making payments. Teachers may be eligible for a new Michigan program that pays the monthly student loan payments for teachers as they work to get their federal loans forgiven. For Michigan borrowers who aren't teachers, there are other options. Plus, some schools are offering grant funding to erase student debt directly owed to universities. And wanted to talk about specifically some of those Michigan specific options for your folks out there. Michigan is engaging in a pilot program to pay monthly loan payments for school district employees. The new state school aid budget includes $225 million that school districts can apply for to pay the monthly loan payments for employees. The Michigan Department of Education is expected to set guidelines for the program, but the budget outlined some parameters. Participants would need to have federal student loans and be enrolled in a repayment program that makes them eligible for student loan forgiveness. Educators, counselors, social workers, psychologists, reading specialists, librarians, and school administrators are potential participants. They must work 32 hours or more per week at a district that works directly with pre-K through 12 students, according to the budget language. The state funding would provide up to $200 per month per borrower and up to $400 for borrowers who work in a high poverty school district to make their monthly loan payment. And wanted to also kind of remind folks of what is at offer at the federal level here as well. Federal student loan borrowers have several payment plan options for their loans. The federal government offers 4 income-driven repayment plans that calculate a borrower's required monthly payment on their income and family size. Each income-driven repayment program has a number of years a borrower is expected to make payments in. Once that period is completed, if a borrower still has a remaining loan balance, that balance is forgiven. Just last month, the Biden administration announced that nearly 27,000 federal student loan borrowers in Michigan would have their loans forgiven. Those borrowers had enrolled in an income-driven repayment program and were eligible for relief because of changes the administration made to which payments count towards qualifying for loan forgiveness. Also, important to note the SAVE plan, that's Saving on a Valuable Education Plan. There has been some changes. SAVE calculates monthly payments based on income and family size, according to the Federal Student Aid website. Borrowers can apply for the plan on the Federal Student Aid site, and those who are enrolled in the former revised pay-as-you-earn plan will be automatically registered for the SAVE plan. And again, a lot of valuable information, and also the article goes on to interview some people who are actually affected by student debt. But this is a good kind of 411 things that you should know about student loans here in Michigan, and especially with all the students coming back for the fall, just a little bit. That was very timely to spend just a little bit of time talking about this. Next thing, this one is actually I'm going to be relaying an important statement from the Michigan Educators Rank and File Safety Committee. I'm reading this is published from the World Socialist website. But it's important to know what some of our comrades in Detroit are dealing with. And I found this collective statement really important because it talks about solidarity between educators and auto workers. Some we don't have to talk about these, kind of these are two sectors of our economy that are typically very much siloed off. Um, and it is important, especially as we're building a more radical militant labor movement here in the United States, that we need to be able to build those bridges, make those connections between radically different types of workplaces. Because at the end of the day, we are all workers and we all share Many of the same problems, and hey, the same oppressors, i.e., the ruling class and the capitalists and such. So, I want to read this from again. This is from the Michigan Educators Rank and File Safety Committee, and they put out this statement saying to unite Detroit public school educators with auto workers to defeat austerity and budget cuts. With the contract of more than 4,000 teachers and support staff in the Detroit Public Schools Community District set to expire, the Detroit Federation of Teachers announced a last minute agreement last Sunday night aimed at preventing a walkout in Michigan's largest school district. Teachers are rightly furious at being told nothing about negotiations all summer, blocked from input, and now being told that they will be given the first details about the contract during an online meeting Monday afternoon. With little or no time to study the whole agreement, educators are being told they must vote on it Monday through Thursday. The negotiations began months ago. Educators were stonewalled about the process throughout, and now we are supposed to decide in a matter of a few hours or days. The rushing through of a vote is a clear sign that it is another sellout. Teachers have a long way to go to catch up with low pay and inadequate benefits. Already, the unions have signed on to School Superintendent Nikolai Vidi's $300 million sorry, $300 million in job eliminations and program cuts. Educators are in a powerful position. The battle at Detroit Public Schools is part of a major working class upsurge. A strike would put educators on course to link up with 170,000 auto workers in the US and Canada whose contracts expire next month. And that's what the DFT apparatus is afraid of. It is time to settle accounts. The Michigan Educators Rank and File Safety Committee calls for 1. No snap vote. School workers must have ample time to scrutinize the entire deal hatched behind our backs, including all MOUs and side agreements between Detroit Public Schools and the AFT apparatus. Any further discussions between these parties must be monitored by trusted rank and file workers and live streamed publicly. For a mass membership meeting in person and democratic discussion before any vote, every member must receive a ballot, and members are rightly concerned that they will not receive an email ballot. Also demanding an immediate 50% raise for all educators and school workers. Educators have never been made whole from decades of concessions. The Detroit Academy of Arts and Sciences will pay teachers $100,000 next school year. If the businesses behind this for-profit operation could pay this amount, we must demand that all educators have the necessary resources to live. Next, increase staffing. Learning loss is real, and schools must address this with robust learning support at every level. Class sizes must be brought down to no more than 20. Instead of layoffs, every school needs mental health professionals, a licensed registered nurse, and full access to support systems for every student. Expand funding. Every family must be provided the tools needed for a modern education, computers, internet access, and options for high quality virtual learning. Every school needs a library with credentialed librarian, instruction in music, both vocal and instrumental, art, science, field trips, and more. This is the 21st century. We need to expand culture, not attack it. Restored and expanded summer enrichment program for all youth. No cuts to any enrichment programs under the guise that quote unquote COVID money is over. And modernize the schools. In order to combat the ongoing pandemic and associated diseases, including RSV and HIV, modern HEPA air filtration and far UV technology must be safely deployed to minimize the spread of infectious diseases and protect public health. The death of Detroit Public Schools kindergartner Jamari Williams from the bacterial illness HIV is a terrible warning. Schools must be and can be made safe from all of these airborne diseases. Any deal that does not include these elemental demands should be rejected and tossed in the garbage where it belongs. But a rejection of the sellout is only the beginning. The Michigan Educators Rank and File Safety Committee is fighting for power and decision making to be transferred from the DFT apparatus to rank and file educators in order to fight for what teachers, our students, and our communities need. not what the corporate controlled politicians and union bureaucrats say is affordable. The Michigan Educators Rank and File Safety Committee will hold a meeting on Saturday, August 26th at 1 p.m. to discuss the strategy and organization of this fight. We urge all educators and their allies and supporters in other industries to attend. The meeting will allow ample time for discussion and questions from the floor. Educators should be warned. The Michigan AFT is currently pushing through a poverty wage contract for graduate student educators at the University of Michigan. We can be certain the TA, if there is one, has been dictated by Superintendent Beatty and the Democratic Party politicians behind him because the same pattern has taken place year after year. It is essential to wrest control of our futures from this corrupt, pro capitalist union apparatus and put it into the hands of educators themselves. DFT President Leica Wilson Lumpkins, the AFT, the Biden administration, and the ruling class as a whole are fearful that educators will merge with the growing wave of working class strikes and rebellions against the trade union bureaucracy. This includes thousands of actors and writers on strike, UPS workers voting on a sellout contract, and auto workers in the US and Canada prepared to strike when their current contracts expire. The ruling elite and its political representatives face the prospect of a massive eruption of working class struggle. A decision or a decisive rejection of the deal by the DFT bureaucracy will send a powerful message to auto workers and the entire working class and strengthen the counteroffensive of the working class against decades of union backed concessions. And I think I'm just going to leave it there for now. But I think it's a couple of reasons I read that is one, inform you about what is going on right now. We've got and kind of that tension between the rank and file teachers and workers in that union and the union leadership that is typically used a little bit less radical, more accommodating to the status quo. And we're seeing this in union after union, industry after industry, that the radical bug is biting even a lot of unions that have historically been a little bit more tempered and more uh, as this article says, pro-capitalist. You're starting to see an upsurge from the bottom of these more radical, well-educated workers who know if something is rotten in the state of capitalism and are uh, willing to put their words and their feet where their mouth is. And also, I think it's a master class in talking about the sort of worker solidarity. You don't see this nearly enough. Talking about uniting with other concurrent struggles, and as they mentioned, the auto workers in Detroit are preparing to potentially go on strike over their own pay and low pay and working conditions. So we're going to keep track of this story, see how it plays out. But again, solidarity to the teachers out in Detroit and to the auto workers who are considering a strike as we speak. We're going to be taking another quick little break. When we come back, I think we're going to be moving to national stories. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your only source for political revolution. And we are back. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So, kind of continuing on with our discussion on education, wanted to pivot to this national story from Truth Out, and I think it does a really excellent job doing a couple things here. Just kind of linking this the kind of cultural reaction from the right that our libraries have been dealing with. The kind of open bigotry and anti woke whatever that we've been seeing these book bans lately. as well as how chronic disinvestment and austerity kind of helped made the ground more fertile for that type of draconian old school book burning, which has been again responsibility of both political parties. You got as we say on the program, we've got two pro-capitalist parties in this country. One's certainly worse than the other, but they are basically the good cop, bad cop for the ruling class. So um, this headline here is GOP book bans and Democratic disinvestment or divestment both created crisis for public libraries. This was written by Jamie Taylor, Truth Out, published on August 18th. On July 31st, the Houston Independent School District announced plans to repurpose 28 libraries into discipline centers, sparking widespread protest. Mayor Sylvester Turner denounced the plan for producing a school district of the haves and the have-nots, where students in low-income schools will have no place to go to their school library to study, to check out a book, get the assistance of a librarian, and expand their own imagination. Students who misbehave in class would be removed from their classrooms and sent to the discipline centers to watch virtual lessons. While Mayor Turner stated, "I don't want HISD schools to look like prisons. This can only be seen as a blatant expansion of the school to prison pipeline at the expense of libraries and learning." The 28 schools slated to lose their libraries and librarians are all participants in the NES or New Education System, a program implemented by Superintendent Mike Miles following a state takeover of Houston's schools. National organizations, including the American Association of School Librarians and PEN America, chimed in to register severe concern about the plan, while the Texas Library Association pushed back against the decision, saying it means dismantling effective school library programs and removing school librarians at schools that need those essential educators and services the most. The Houston school library fight is the latest front in the ongoing struggle to protect the right to read in the state. HB 900, a bill meant to remove what Texas Republicans call sexually explicit materials from school libraries, was signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott earlier this year and is set to take effect September 1st. When Abbott signed the bill in June, he said, "Some school libraries have books with sexually explicit and vulgar materials. I'm signing a law that gets that trash out of our schools." The new law is already increasing the volume of challenges and book removals, including in Katy Independent School District, the site of significant student organizing last year. In response, at the federal level, Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island and Representative Raul Grijalva from Arizona introduced the Right to Read Act last year and reintroduced it in April. According to the American Library Association, the bill would ensure all students, including low income and minority students, children with disabilities, and English language learners, have access to an effective school library staffed by a certified school librarian, and reaffirm that First Amendment rights apply to school libraries in response to the growing trend of book bans. For families in Houston, statewide efforts to purge school libraries coincide with the state takeover of the city's school district, which the Houston Federation of Teachers has called a reckless experiment, producing a particularly challenging environment for organizers in this reliably Democrat-leading city. And while it can be tempting to point to the problems facing Houston schools as linked to Republican legislation and governance, the problem of divestment in libraries doesn't belong to a single party. Prior to state control, the school district faced significant equity issues linked to school libraries. According to the group HISD Kids Needs Libraries, 30% of schools in the district lacked well-resourced staffed libraries. The problem is mirrored in other blue strongholds, including New York City, where, despite a chancellor's regulation requiring school libraries, only a minority of schools can boast such facilities. Disinvestment in school libraries is a distinctly nonpartisan issue. And it's not just schools. When he was mayor of Newark, New Jersey in 2010, Democrat Cory Booker slashed public library funding, closing three branches altogether, reducing hours of those that survived, and furloughing library staff for 15 weeks, resulting in pay cuts of 40%. The same year, Ed Rendell, the Democratic governor of Pennsylvania, stripped 21% of the state budget for libraries, leading to huge cuts in collections budgets and replacing many full time library workers with part time and volunteer staff. The next year, Rendell cut libraries' budgets by another 9%. And in New York City, public libraries faced down $36 million in cuts proposed by Democrat Eric Adams in the latest budget cycle, and what's come to be an annual ritual leaving activists fighting against cuts rather than for greater investments. As with Houston's diversion of library spaces to discipline in New York, the proposed library cuts were in contrast to billions of dollars for NYPD overtime and raises. So, again, less money for public schools, more money for the police. The current politicization of libraries is often cast as a party line battle. Democratic legislators line up against book bans while Republicans argue for parental right to control the books to which children have access, with each side scoring points and votes. While this analysis may hold for individual pitched battles, it doesn't tell the larger truth about disinvestment in the public that both parties have promoted for decades. Earlier this year, for example, Missouri's Republican government attempted to pass a budget that cut $4.5 million from public libraries, which was unsuccessful only due to overwhelming efforts by library and free speech advocates. The Missouri legislature's reasoning might be different from Eric Adams's or Cory Booker's, but the outcome is the same. Unequal access to school library resources and services didn't begin with Governor Abbott's takeover of Houston schools, and it won't end with Democratic legislative control. What's required is commitment across the political spectrum to expanding public institutions so that they can better meet the needs of the people where they serve. Again, that was an article from Truth Out written by Jamie Taylor. GOP book bans and Democratic divestment both created crisis for public libraries. We're going to take another quick little break. We come back. I've got some international coverage. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on in Niger. Actually, before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about Hawaii. So when we come back, we're going to talk about Hawaii, and then we're going to talk about what's going on in Niger. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your only source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody. We are back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So I want to talk again about the wildfires in Hawaii and particularly the intersection of that with disaster capitalism and gentrification. We talked a little bit about climate change last week in the context of this, and I think there's this really brilliant article comes to us from Naomi Klein, really summing up kind of how the indigenous population of Hawaii is at odds with real estate capitalism, who are salivating at the idea of all of these burnt down neighborhoods as places they can put new luxury condominiums and the like. And this article that they wrote for The Guardian, I think, really sums up a lot of the sort of disaster capitalism that's going on in Hawaii right now. And I'm going to just read a couple of excerpts from the article. Again, you can find and read for yourself the entire article at The Guardian. The headline is, "Why Was There No Water to Fight the Fire in Maui?" It's written by Naomi Klein and Kapu Ala Sproat. Disaster capitalism, the well-worn tactic of exploiting moments of extreme collective trauma to rapidly push through unpopular laws that benefit a small elite, relies on a cruel dynamic. As Lee Cataluna, an indigenous Maui-born journalist, observed recently, the people on the front lines of the disaster are necessarily focused on survival stuff, announcements, services, instruction, help, go here to get gas, look at this list to see if your husband's name is there, not on coercive real estate deals or backroom policy moves, which is why this tactic too often succeeds. Disaster capitalism has taken many forms in different contexts. In New Orleans, after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, there was an immediate move to replace public schools with charter schools and to bulldoze public housing projects to make way for gentrifying townhouses. In Puerto Rico, after Hurricane Maria in 2017, the public schools were once again under siege, and there was a push to privatize the electricity grid before the storm had made landfall. In Thailand and Sri Lanka, after the 2004 tsunami, valuable beachfront land previously stewarded by small scale fishers and farmers was seized by real estate developers while their rightful occupants were stuck in evacuation camps. It's always a little different, which is why some native Hawaiians have taken to calling their unique version by a slightly different term: plantation disaster capitalism. It's a name that speaks to contemporary forms of neo-colonialism and climate profiteering, like the real estate agents who have been cold calling Lahana residents who have lost everything to the fire and prodding them to sell their ancestral lands rather than wait for compensation. But it also places these moves inside the long and ongoing history of settler colonial resource theft and trickery, making clear that while disaster capitalism may have some modern disguises, it's a very old tactic, a tactic that Native Hawaiians have a great deal of experience resisting. For over a century, water across Maui in Komoahana, the western region of the island, has been extracted to benefit outside interests, first large sugar plantations, and more recently, their corporate successors. The companies, including West Maui Land Corporation and its subsidiaries, as well as Kanapali Land Management and Maui Land and Pineapple Incorporated, have devoured the island's natural resources to develop McMansions, colonial style subdivisions, luxury resorts, and golf courses where cane and pineapple once grew. This historical and modern plantation economy has taken a tremendous toll on water in particular, draining indigenous ecologies of their natural moisture. Lahaina, once known as the Venice of the Pacific, has been transformed into a parched desert, which is part of what made it so vulnerable to fire. Plantation skimming wells dried up Mokahanina, as well as at least 15 acres of freshwater fish pond that nourish Mokulalu, an island within the pond that was the seat of the Hawaiian kingdom. In the early 1900s, the plantation filled Mokahanina with dirt, and eventually a baseball field and parking lot appeared over the sacred site. Even long after most of these original plantations closed, the infrastructure and dynamics of water theft remained. Today, many native Hawaiian communities who had lived in Maui Komohana since immemorial, remain cut off from water for their basic needs, including drinking, laundry, and traditional crop irrigation. For instance, Lauren Palakiko, whose family had resided in Kauala for centuries and has priority water rights under the law, last year testified at a state water commission hearing that she had to bathe her baby in a bucket because not enough water reached her home. That's because the streams that once flowed through their valley are diverted for luxury subdivisions, which often occupy plantation controlled lands. Skipping down just a little bit, the climate emergency has only deepened these tensions, worsening droughts, and as the world now knows, creating conditions ripe for wildfires. Over the last 5 years, fires have ravaged Kauai Valley, intensifying the wars over who has the right to access scarce water, including for critical firefighting uses. In this high stakes context, growing numbers of native Hawaiian communities have organized to assert their water rights, which is supposed to have the highest protection under Hawaii law, including its constitution, statutory water code, and landmark Hawaii Supreme Court precedents. Native Hawaiians across Maui, Komahana have partnered with lawyers for nearly 3 decades in pursuit of restorative justice. After protracted struggle and despite predictable opposition from industry, the Community and Water Commission eventually prevailed, instituting a new permitting system that the community hoped would restore public control over water that had been stolen for over a century. But here's the cruelest irony. The deadline to submit those permit applications to the Water Commission was on Monday, August 7th, and the fire that devoured Lahaina was the very next day. The Hawaii governor's administration wasted no time in issuing emergency proclamations that suspended a series of laws, including Hawaii's state water code to the extent necessary to respond to the emergency. The plantation successors leapt into action, attempting an end run around the designation process that they had been unsuccessful in stopping before the emergency proclamation. In the days after the fires, WML demanded the Water Commission suspend protection for streams across Maui Komahana, even in areas untouched by fire, and insinuated that the Commission's deputy director, Kaleo Manuel, who had been the agency's public face throughout the designation process, was to blame for the destructive fire. The Commission chair granted the request, allowing the corporation to divert the streams to fill the reservoirs that serve as its luxury developments. WML finally requested that the entire designation process be suspended and ultimately modified. Its own executive publicly stated, "I would love to see it gone," a move denounced by the Earth Justice managing attorney Isaac Morowake as an attempt to use this tragedy for cheap advantage. This is a classic case of the most craven disaster capitalism. A small elite group using a profound human tragedy as their window to roll back a hard-won grassroots victory for water rights, while removing civil servants who pose a political inconvenience to the administration's pro-developer agenda. And there's more to that article. I would encourage people to go read it, check it out. And that's at The Guardian. Why was there no water to fight the fire in Maui? By Naomi Klein and Kapua Ala Sprout. But I would say it does go on to talk about too how Native Hawaiians are really resisting and fighting back this attempt to capitalize on this horrific disaster that they're all experiencing. And I think it holds key lessons for the rest of us, particularly us here in Michigan, who this is a common theme we talk about on the show, with the idea that Michigan in a generation or two will be something of a climate safe haven for the rest of the world. It is going to really be up to us to protect these resources and make sure that it is the common people who have access to them and not these mega corporations, Nestle, for example, because they're going to be important for a broader global community as people seek refuge here in the Great Lakes state. We're going to take another quick little break. We come back. We've got an international story to bring you, an update on what's going on in Niger. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your only source for political revolution. Hello, we are back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Quick reminder, you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, and we have Media Cyphers podcast. That's Media Cyphers Kalamazoo. You can find that on most podcasting apps out there. And of course, a big thank you to Wider, who has hosted our lovely show here, allowed us to host our lovely show here for the past 7 years. And if you're watching this on video, it's going to be one of the last shows I do from here in the old Flaunt's studio. Yeah, got a lot of feels about that. I've dropped a lot of truth bombs from the studio in the last 7 years, and be kind of bittersweet moving on to the new one. But it's good for us. We've got some shiny new toys and stuff that we'll be able to play with and bring you even better quality programming in the future. So the next issue I want to talk about. So I kind of felt it behooved me to update on this issue because I gave a very kind of surface level reading to what was going on in Niger earlier, which is I presented an article from the Intercept a couple of weeks ago talking about how some of the coup leaders involved in Niger had been trained by the U.S. And as the weeks have unfolded, I kind of felt bad because I feel like just that may be true. That is true, but it's also slightly reductive, and I think it kind of tinged the current events in a certain skewed in a certain light. Which is to say, again, a lot of people who listen to my show, they probably consider themselves a left or on the leftist or on the left or whatever. Um, so there's kind of an innate suspicion when we see people who are trained by the U.S. to do people trained by the U.S. go on to overthrow particular governments, because this has been historically very much a tool of the right wing. We saw, we saw Pinochet. There was the notorious School of the Americas, where the U.S. would literally train these paramilitary juntas on how to engage in counterinsurgency, which is fancy speak for terrorize the local population so they don't get any revolutionary ideas. So there's kind of an innate suspicion when we see, okay, people trained by the U.S. or don't go, ooh, they're probably going to sell out their people to the nearest capitalist interest or something. Again, great book to read about this. The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman. You kind of get a ground eye view from how that actually works. But there's a little more complicated what's going on in Africa right now. There is an upsurge of this sort of revolutionary nationalism that we haven't seen in the better part of 40 years, 30, 40 years. And I think that's exemplified. I'm going to quote, this is Ibrahim Traore, who is the current interim leader of Burkina Faso. And I'm also going to read an article from Left Voice, but to talk about kind of the more revolutionary nationalist mood in Africa, I think this quote from sums it up. And this is, of course, auspicious because this comes from Burkina Faso, which, if you are a socialist like me, you might know the history of Burkina Faso. They, for several years in the 80s, Burkina Faso was headed by Thomas Sankara, an avowed Marxist-Leninist socialist, and for a few years there ran it as a socialist People's Republic before he was assassinated. Well, if we could take these words from Ibrahim at face value, it seems like the spirit of Thomas Sankara is still alive and well in Burkina Faso and in Africa. Um, because I first heard the speech, it kind of sent chills up my spine, and I'll read it to you folks so you gotta get what I'm talking about. Again, this is from the current leader of Burkina Faso. Again, this is of course translated. The questions my generation is asking are the following, if I can summarize. It is what we do not understand how Africa, with so much wealth on our soil, with generous nature, water, sunshine, and abundance, how Africa is today the poorest continent. And how come there are heads of state all over the world begging? These are the questions we are asking ourselves, and we have no answers so far. We have the opportunity to forge new relationships, and I hope that these relationships can be the best ones to give our people a better future. My generation also asks me to say that because of this poverty, they are forced to cross the ocean to try to reach Europe. They die in the ocean. But soon they will no longer have to cross, because they will come to our palaces to seek their daily bread. As far as what concerns Burkina Faso today, for more than 8 years, we've been confronted with the most barbaric and most violent form of imperialist neo-colonialism. Slavery continues to impose itself on us. Our predecessors taught us one thing: a slave who cannot assume his own revolt does not deserve to be pitied. We do not feel sorry for ourselves. We do not ask anyone to feel sorry for us. The people of Burkina Faso have decided to fight against terrorism, and in order to relaunch their development. So again, that kind of paints the sort of that sort of revolutionary nationalist mood that's going on in Africa right now that I think is an important context that I didn't really present last time. And I want to follow that up with an article from Left Voice that really dives a little deeper into some of the nuts and bolts of this anti-colonial mood that's going on in Africa right now. It's from Claudia Sinati. It's published on August 7th. Coup in Niger shows France's imperialist decline. The coup d'etat in Niger has opened an explosive situation in Africa with international ramifications. On July 26, a few days before the 63rd anniversary of the country's formal independence from France, members of the Presidential Guard, led by General Abdourahmane Tiani, surrounded the presidential palace and arrested President Mohamed Bazoum. As the hours went by, the push turned into a full-fledged coup. After receiving majority support of the armed forces, General Tiani himself announced in a televised message that he was assuming control of the government. The streets of Niamey, the capital of the impoverished African country, were filled with demonstrators in support of the coup. Many had held handwritten signs against the French neo-colonial presence, particularly La France doit partir, France must leave. The French embassy was also attacked. The fall of President Bazoum was a further blow to France's diminished imperial claims. While President Emmanuel Macron assured that he would not tolerate any attack against France and its interests, he was quickly preparing the evacuation of 600 French nationals from the Nigerian capital, or Niger capital, whose safety he could no longer guarantee. In addition to geopolitical and military dimensions, the change of power in Niger has economic consequences. A significant percentage of the uranium produced by Niger powers France's energy grid. France's main source of energy is nuclear power, which is at risk if these uranium exports are lost. Until the day before the coup, Niger was a key player in the United States and France's strategy in Africa. Ruled by an ally to the west, the country was considered a factor of relative stability in a deeply unstable region and a bulwark in the war on terror, particularly after NATO's intervention in Libya and its transformation into a failed state. France has stationed some 1,500 troops in Niger, mostly displaced from Mali after its humiliating expulsion last year. The Pentagon still has about 1,000 troops and 2 bases in Niger. One of those bases is very important, as it was where drone strikes are launched against Al Qaeda, the Islamic State, and other militia groups such as Boko Haram, which became famous for kidnapping hundreds of girls from a school in Nigeria. In addition, President Bazoum was working closely with French and European Union efforts to stem the waves of migrants by blocking their access to North African countries, from where smugglers transport migrants to the Mediterranean. The loss of this ally has therefore had an impact beyond West Africa and forces the Western powers to recalculate their imperialist anti immigrant strategy. In a major twist, Niger has now become the latest link in a chain of coups, 7 in the last 3 years, that have shaken the Sahel region. It has become part of the so called Coup corridor, a 3,400-mile strip stretching from Guinea on the west coast through Mali, Burkina Faso, we just read the speech of their leader, and Chad and Sudan at the other end. What is indisputable is that Africa has entered fully into a strategic dispute between 2 blocs. One of these is the Western Bloc, led by the United States and made up of the EU and NATO and its allies. The other bloc is the informal alliance between Russia and China, whose main theater of operations is the war in Ukraine. In this turbulent context of rivalries and shifting alliances, other minor powers such as Turkey are also asserting their influence. African countries' geopolitical realignment is expressed in a number of ways, including in the heated anti-French and anti-Western rhetoric of the governments that emerged from these coups.
Andy,
Yeah, I think
you are not live at the moment. I believe that left mic is geeking out a little bit. If we have you use
Okay.
this one's
Okay.
hot right
All
now.
right.
So
Okay. Check. Okay.
here,
Yeah. Okay. All right, sorry about that, folks. Okay. All right, I had to switch microphones real quick. This is my bad. Thanks again to the wider staff, yeah, for pointing that out. Oh, okay. By the way, if you didn't miss any of this, it will be online. I'm going to be uploading it to YouTube probably probably later this evening or tomorrow. Um, so again, sorry about the technical difficulties there, folks. So anyway, talking about what's going on in Niger. Um, kind of going to go down a little bit to talking about a little bit more of the historical context. Both as a French colony and since its independence in 1960, Niger has been subjected to extreme poverty, dependence, and plunder. It is one of the poorest countries with one of the highest birth rates in the world. Its social indicators are alarming. 41% of its 25 million inhabitants live in absolute poverty. Barely 11% have access to basic health services, and an estimated 7% are still subjected to slave like conditions. Droughts and land desertification caused by climate change are affecting family farming, which around 80% of the population rely on for survival. But this misery contrasts with the fact that Niger is the world's seventh largest uranium producer and also produces gold and oil. Most of the uranium mines are controlled by imperialist corporations, with France's Orono leading the way. As a result of imperialist plundering, not a cent of these riches is left for the vast masses in Niger. What Niger and more generally the coups with anti French sentiments show is the profound rejection of the neo colonial interference and oppression that continued in the form of the so called Francophobia after the formal independence of these countries in the 1960s. France's gendarme role in its former African colonies, the imposition of local elites aligned with interests, and its military presence have been at the service of plundering these countries' resources. Although France is a declining power and China has taken its place as the African continent's privileged trading partner, it is resisting its loss of influence in what was once its backyard. Even the currency of the African financial community, previously tied to the French franc and now the euro, persists as a colonial hangover, as it is still used by 14 African countries. The relationship between the structural misery of these plundered countries and the neo colonial past and present explains the deep anti French sentiment that runs through Africa, especially among the younger generations. The coups are largely motivated by cliquish disputes over control of the military state apparatus rather than being anti colonial, let alone anti imperialist. These groups try to build their legitimacy by stirring up anti French sentiment and shifting allegiances to China and Russia. The policy was best expressed by Captain Ibrahim Traore, and we read some of their statement earlier, the current leader of Burkina Faso's interim government after the coup. At the Russia-Africa Summit, Traore invoked the memory of Thomas Sankara, the leader of the anti-colonial struggle in the 1980s and a notable figure of Pan-Africanism. The hegemonic decline of the United States and the emergence of powers such as China and Russia that propose a multipolar order as an alternative has accelerated with the war in Ukraine. This is the basis of campus possessions that believe that in order to oppose the imperialist domination of the US and the EU, it is necessary to align with China and Russia. However, these two countries represent equally reactionary capitalist bloc pursuing its own imperial interests. While the Western powers claim to act in defense of democracy in order to obfuscate their imperialist objective, Putin uses anti colonial rhetoric to increase his geopolitical influence for the benefit of Russian capitalism. Both Russia and China seek to plunder Africa's strategic resources. China imposes onerous conditions on loans to African countries in its role as their main creditor. This is in opposition to the interests of the workers, peasants, and oppressed peoples of Africa and the world. So again, kind of a nuanced reading of, and I wanted to get back to it because, again, previous article, I really hemmed on the fact that the coup leaders were trained by the U.S. But what we're seeing is an interesting thing where it's almost like there were it reminded me of certain like Black Panthers in the 60s who would deliberately join the US military, then go AWOL so that they could get training and bring that home to their revolutionary organizations. Now, let's say we're sure that's what's going on. As we've seen before, imperialism can play a long game. Maybe maybe some of these people are kind of playing the revolutionary and will cede to capitalism later on. Time will tell. But at least from what we're seeing rhetorically and some of the actions made by some leadership in Niger and countries like Burkina Faso, it does seem like they are at least rhetorically standing up against the hegemony of neocolonialism and imperialism. Although I think this article does make a really good point towards the end, where we've also been seeing them kind of pivoting to China and Russia as opposed to the US and the EU. And it's important to point out that, like, while like the enemy of my enemy is my friend type of logic can come into play here, hopefully these African leaders and revolutionary nationalists do not lose sight of the fact that Russia in particular is a capitalist power. They are kind of warming up to Africa out of geopolitical convenience, but given the opportunity, they would likely plunder Africa in just the same way as the U.S. And countries like France have done historically. So it is with, I hope, the utmost caution that these leaders engage in these kind of strategic relationships. Okay, well, with that, we got about 10 minutes left on the program. Um, just wanted to remind a couple things. That petition for the Ho Top 10 is still running, and we will link to that in our show notes. Those are the folks who were arrested uh, for trying to protect houseless folks at the Ampersee Encampment back in 2021. For now, we're gonna close out play you out with some more Quantum Fleet. If you missed any of our show due to technical difficulties, my apologies. This will be uploaded online later this week, so you can catch the full episode on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook. We got Media Cyphers on Facebook, as well as our podcast, Media Cyphers Kalamazoo, which you can follow on most podcasting apps. Stay tuned until 2 o'clock. We'll be segueing into some electropop therapy. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.